So the order I have is that Jo Bosanquet, who is Chief Executive of the Foundation of Nursing Studies, or FOND, is going to come up and do her bit first, and I will step daintily back here, okay. Or I could keep the chair warm. I could keep the chair warm. There we go.
I've kept it warm for Steve. Morning, everybody. Isn't it lovely to be together? Yay! I've got a dress on for the first time in literally 3 years. Put a bit of weight on, but anyway, there we are. Just don't say anything. I'm privileged to be here today. As some people will know me as the Chief Executive at the Foundation of Nursing Studies, but my background is I've been all over the place, really, and I was in Public Health England as the Deputy Chief Nurse for about 7 years before I decided on a change of career. So if anybody's interested in the charity sector, I'm here all day. So my table is going to focus on adapting the career pathways for new generations of nurses. So I've got 3 bullet points, 3 questions that I want to be addressing on my table. So if I just give you a flavour of the kind of things that we're going to be talking about. And I did get some consensus from my teammates on this. These are not just from my own head. This is from the work that we've been doing at the Foundation of Nursing Studies for the last kind of few years, 3 years really. So we want to talk about flexible careers. What do we need to do about flexibility across the health and care system? And that obviously includes placements, because I've just put that up on there as a bit of a taster. And then we want to talk about your experiences. So what have you done locally? What are you hearing about that's really good locally around adapting pathways, adapting career pathways and flexible working? And then the big question, if you had a magic wand, what kind of career pathways do we need for the next kind of bit of our journey together? So that's what I'll be talking on my table. So please join us, and I don't want to be lonely. So thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jo. What colour were you, Jo? Do you know? You were red. So it's the red table's just over there if you want to talk with Jo. So next up is Alison Warren, Senior Lecturer at Birmingham City University.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to hold a table here. So I'm on the blue tables, and the theme for our tables is accommodating the needs of 4 generations of nurses. And I'm actually stood here, and I realised that in November 1982, I started my nursing career, and now 40 years on, I'm really proud to be presenting here today. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts about nursing across the generations and your experiences, your workplace observations, and how we can actually recruit successfully and retain our more junior nurses, but also the retention of our older generation of nurses that we may be trying to attract back into the organisations to support the workforce. So very much looking forward to sharing your thoughts on the blue table.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alison. Yep, blue table for Alison. And next up is Rafi Hattar, who is Chief Commercial Officer at Dataflow.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back. We had a very nice event at the brewery last year, and I would really say that the same problems persist. We haven't had, any even inch of change since last year, especially to bridging the gap with regard to the recruitment of nurses. Still, the NHS is facing this big hurdle with more than 50,000 jobs shortage for nurses around the country. And our table discussion for today is around how to bridge that gap, how the recruitment of international nurses. Is it happening fast enough? Is it happening efficiently enough? How do we make the UK more attractive for international nurses to come and work here? Are they being well taken of in terms of well-being? So there are many questions that we need to address to be able to really work on this issue and to bridge that gap for that where the NHS system is really overwhelmed, and it will keep on suffering for years to come. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rafi. So international recruitment with Rafi is on the green tables. I'm going to move over here because it's probably a slightly better location. And next up is Liz Fenton, who is a Queen's Nurse and a Deputy Chief Nurse from HEE.
Good morning, everyone. And when we're thinking about recruiting and retaining nurses into our teams, I'd like to think about how we can bring back those nurses, midwives and AHPs with lapsed registration into the profession. They will bring significant professional and life experience back into our teams. And an investment of time at the beginning to help them return to the register can bring back into our teams all that experience that they've gained through their careers. And generally, these are local people looking for local jobs. So I'd like us to think about what more can we do to attract people back, how we can support them through their return to practice programme, and also I think there's perhaps something about how we can better raise the awareness of the support offer that we have within Health Education England. So I'm looking forward to having that discussion with some of you in a little while. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Liz. So Liz is on the purple tables, and that's about attracting experienced nurses back to the profession. And our last but not least is Carolyn Fox, Strategic Nurse Advisor for the Nursing Director at NHS England, and she's going to be on the yellow tables, I think, which you can just see behind our panel there.
Good morning, everybody. So I would very much welcome you to our table. We're going to be focusing on the role of the healthcare support worker, growing the healthcare support workforce through innovative and sustainable recruitment. We've got 3 questions and we'd really like to hear from you. How can recruitment colleagues support clinical leaders and the clinical workforce to recruit innovatively? What can we do to remove the recruitment challenges, and what can we do to support rapid healthcare support worker recruitment and reduce post-offer attrition? So we'd really like to have this conversation with you, and I'm sure there'll be lots of fun on our tables. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And our panel have been brilliant, and we've actually finished early on the introductory talks, which is just amazing, so thank you. Round of applause. Great, thank you. Okay, so our facilitators will now go to their colour-coded tables. Please choose which one you're interested in, so red, blue, purple, green or yellow. Do your discussions, talk for about half an hour, I think, and then our facilitators will join me back on stage and we'll discuss the findings. So thank you. See you in a bit. Right. So thanks very much, everyone, for engaging in that. I hope you found it useful. And so that's our first one, which is on recruitment, but we're also going to do retention, well-being and equality, diversity, inclusion throughout the rest of the day. So you'll get to talk about lots of different topics. And our facilitators have obviously got copious notes, so they're going to feed back on that, and then they're going to pass their notes to our team over on the left-hand side, or your right-hand side, who you may have noticed at the beginning, from Smart Art Visuals, who are basically turning the day into a visual representation. And then we're going to scan that and turn it into a digital thing as well. So if you want to go and have a look at that and what they're doing, please do. So I'm now going to pass on to the facilitators to get their feedback. Thank you, everyone. You ready? Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm going to go in the same order as I did before. So Joe Bosanquet, please.
Hi, everybody. That was wonderful, wasn't it? Just the amount of passion and conversation and, its focus on the tables was brilliant. So I'd like to thank my 4 red tables for a wonderful discussion. And we've got about an essay's worth of notes, so that's great for the Nursing Times to have that. So we talked about flexible career pathways and recruitment strategies and what do we need for the future. And I don't think anything's a huge surprise, but what was interesting for me was the focus on organisations sharing. So being able to lift and shift. So if I'm a nurse or a midwife in X, then why can't we kind of move around a little bit more? So recruitment strategies need to be really, really flexible. We talked a lot about apprenticeships, so breaking down the barriers of funding. And I know what that feels like from a charity perspective. And to ask for funding, to access funding, to understand what that funding is and how you get it and how you spend it and how you tick all the boxes is really complicated. So we need to start breaking down the barriers of that as well. We want some flexibility within our higher education institutions as well. We need to be thinking about, well, what does the future look like for nursing and midwifery? Are our programmes as I think Mark said this morning, are our programmes currently fit for purpose for the future? We need to trust each other. That came out hugely on our discussions. We need some trust because we know what we need, and so therefore we need to be around that table. And we need some validation of future career pathways, which is, we used to have the English National Board, we used to have validation and accreditation of our post-registration programmes, and so there was call for that as well. Beautifully as well around preceptorship and mentorship, which pleases us at FONS and the FNF hugely around preceptorship and supervision. Really, really important. We talked about digital roles as well, and also top-up, so that apprenticeship career, healthcare support worker, registered nursing associate, and for the ones that want to top up, making that really easy. But actually, one of the biggest things that everybody talked about on every table was, what happens if you want to stay where you are because you're really, really happy? Why is there this constant pressure to do, to be, to grow, to move? How do we support our nurses and midwives who really just love where they are and want to stay where they are? And obviously that it does include agenda for change, of course it does. I can't fix that, but we do need to consider valuing each other for the roles that we're in. So I think that's probably it for me. There are lots and lots more, but they're all on there.
Great, thank you, Jo.
Thanks, Steve.
Right, Alison, you're up next.
So we had some incredibly good discussions on our blue table, and that was around the support for our generations, particularly when it comes down to recruitment. And I think a common theme that I think you'd all agree was actually that flexibility, because we need to be thinking about a more flexible workplace. And whilst there are policies, procedures in place to support flexible working, what I'm hearing from the tables really is, in principle, those flexible working policies are there, but in practice, they're not working very well, or they accommodate some individuals, but not all. So, that was an incredibly common theme. And actually, one of the things that came out was, when we actually recruit, is it individualised? Are we thinking outside the box? What is the flexibility and what can we offer from day one if we're offering a new registrant a job or one of our older generation a job? What can we guarantee for them from the hours that they work, and what reassurance will we give that those hours are not changed, or there's flexibility to change as work and personal circumstances change. Also that came out, and I think you mentioned the digital support for all levels, and also when that comes to actually interconnecting and get systems that actually talk to each other. A really good theme that came out from this table here was actually giving the opportunity to design their own rota and see whether that works, because often we have been dictated by quite archaic rota systems that we accept in the NHS, but is it time, when we're thinking about flexible working, to actually look at what rotas we're offering, and is it worth getting our younger generation actually to create those rotas to see if they're going to work? We need to be open to ideas from an organisational point of view. From our NHS leaders, we need to open our eyes and actually listen to what our younger workforce wants, but also considering our older workforce as well. Because again, some of the themes came out was that actually our potential baby boomers and Generation X are sitting back and listening to our Generation Y and Z, dictating almost what they want from the workforce, whereas those older generations have actually just got on with it for years and years and years without an awful lot of thanks. And are we listening to them, and what support are we putting in for our older workforce? So I think they were the key things. Again, be kind, say thank you was another really strong theme, and a loyalty and fairness of opportunity for all generations. I think that probably has covered most of the themes, but we had some absolutely fantastic discussions, so thank you.
Thank you, Alison. And next up is Rafi.
Hello again. I think we had some really interesting discussions. We had 4 full tables, so green team. I think today we had very interesting points, and there was a consensus between the 4 tables on several aspects when it comes to the international recruitment of nurses. So there are 3 main aspects where there are challenges within the international nursing recruitment. First, when it comes to the recruitment and licensing process. Secondly, when landing in the UK. And third, living and pursuing a career in the UK. So there are challenges in all 3 aspects. First, when it comes to recruitment and licensing, the English language barriers, having consistent criteria when it comes to the licensing and recruitment of nurses, not being transparent with nurses when it comes to life in the UK, cost of living, taxes, all types of challenges that they face when they land here. And then when they come here, there's a big challenge when it comes to accommodation. Most hospitals provide 3 months at first, but then when they come out, they face, they find out that the cost for accommodation is really high and it eats up a big part of the salary. Then pastoral support and visas, they cannot bring in their families. There are big issues when it comes to being, if you're a pregnant nurse, or if you have family members that you want to bring in. It's also a big issue. Some discrimination from also apartment owners when it comes to giving accommodation to nurses. And then pursuing of careers and having career progression, because the experience in the home country is not recognized. So that brings us back to the practices that are used to recruit and license the nurses. So I think a big challenge for all nurses, international nurses that come into the country, is that their experience is not recognized. In the way they are licensed, a big part of this experience depends on their training in the UK, how many years they accumulate here in the UK. So many of these things can be remedied with following better models or more efficient models that are going on in other countries, because it is still a pretty much bureaucratic process within the UK, and following some international best practices can mitigate and help overcome many of these issues, especially that there is big competition within the Middle East, within the US, for international nurses with better salaries, better accommodation, and better standards of living. So this is why many of these questions need to be addressed to be able to bridge the gap. And for several years we've been talking about 40,000, 60,000 nurses shortage, but this is not going to go away. So I think all organizations, the NHS, NMC, all the stakeholders need to work together to be able to come up with more efficient processes and better ways to be able to recruit, license, and support these nurses throughout the life cycle. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rafi. And Liz, you're next.
And thank you very much to Team Purple. We may have only had 2 tables, but we went for quality over quantity, I think. So really, really interesting discussion. And we were focusing not just on returners with lapsed registration, but also those that may have been out of practice and need their confidence built to get back into the workforce. How people find out about programmes and returning roles was a really key theme. Certainly there's some work that in HEE we need to do about how we promote the programmes, what's out there, the support that's offered, and also how we can look at a single point of information. There is information out there on our website, on health careers, on the NMC, but actually you've probably got to know it's there to find out about returning, and often they signpost you back to each other, which perhaps is less helpful. So we do need that that single point. And potentially one of the things we talked about is, do we need a national campaign? Because numbers are relatively small across England, it's a lot of work in individual universities and organisations to promote. So is there something we can do nationally? And then across both tables, we talked a lot about how we can make that process easier for those that are looking to return. You know, these are busy people. They've probably got full-time jobs and have made this decision that they want to come back. So we need to make that as easy for them as possible. And again, we talked about a system-wide approach, and also perhaps how we look about how they do the learning for those that need the talk programme. Can we offer an online learning approach rather than them having to juggle family commitments, possibly paid work, their practice experience and study? There was also something quite significant about the experience of those that are on a returning programme, and we were really lucky to have someone on the table that has actually gone through the process and said actually how difficult it was, that there are lots of hoops we're asking people to jump through. Often returners will go into placement and their previous professional or life experience is not recognised, that they're treated as a pre-reg student. We need to acknowledge that their learning needs are different, and where we can, that there's a flexible and individualised approach. Because there's some really positives there, that once we get somebody in, you know, these are local people looking for local jobs by and large, so you've got a permanent member of staff probably for some time. And the second table had a lot of discussion about perhaps they don't always want to go straight back into a ward or a community team. Perhaps we can be a bit creative and think about roles such as legacy mentors to encourage people to come back. So lots of discussion, lots of things that I'm going to be taking away, and thank you all for a great conversation.
Great, thank you, Liz. And Carolyn.
So firstly, a very big thank you to the two yellow tables. We had some very lively discussion and debate. One table facilitated by myself and the other table facilitated by Clive. So just a brief recap on the questions, and I'm going to give you the headlines. How can recruitment colleagues support clinical leaders to recruit innovatively? We had some really fantastic discussion about this. We needed to be exciting. We needed to have creative pathways. We needed to have interactive open days. We needed to think about the use of webinars, and we needed to think about the generations and what the different generations want to do in order to apply for roles. We also talked about the use of community groups and schools in terms of making sure that the local hospital, the local NHS, was represented by its local population. Question number 2, we talked about what can we do to remove recruitment challenges. We talked about applicant availability. So we heard some really innovative stories about organisations recruiting at the weekends and recruiting out of hours and doing this on a regular basis. We talked about the entry requirements for healthcare support workers and whether we set the bar too high and whether we should think more about those individuals who are new to care, who care perhaps for relatives, but certainly meet the NHS values. We also talked very much about the support of candidates. So supporting candidates not only through the process, but then giving them a buddy and having regular touch points so that we didn't lose them while we were going through other recruitment processes. We also talked about challenging ourselves and challenging some of those internal pathways. Does it need to take so long from offering somebody a job to bringing them into the workforce? So we had some real debate about the application process, debate about the recruitment process, and how we might speed things up quite considerably. The third question was, what can we do to support rapid healthcare support worker recruitment and reduce post-offer attrition? We had some really healthy debate here. And again, one of the things that came up was point of offer contact, but making sure also that people knew the type of role that they were actually going into. So making sure that we embrace the expertise of our current healthcare support workers in perhaps recruiting our new healthcare support workers, taster days, so on and so forth. We also talked about the industry standard, and we reflected on how long it perhaps took us to recruit healthcare support workers on occasions when we know that our healthcare support workers are taking the opportunity to perhaps take up other job offers because they're going to be in post in a very short space of time. Some industries as short as 3 days. So we talked about that in a great deal of detail, which took us back to that streamline our processes, and of course the debate that lots of people have had, which is we seem to manage it during COVID. I think the other thing that we touched on, perhaps more so maybe the other table, was about the halo effect of the NHS, that people do want to come and work for the NHS. The NHS is a great brand, but perhaps because it takes us a little while, in some cases weeks, to bring people on board, people then choose to take other jobs from a healthcare support worker workforce perspective, and we lose them to jobs that they're perhaps not as happy in. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. And thank you to our panel, Joe, Rafi, Alison, Liz, and Carolyn. Thank you very much. And thank you all to you as well for having some great discussions and working really hard. It's now time for coffee, basically, or whatever you want that's like coffee. So see you back in about half an hour. Thank you.